So if you wanted to give ChatGPT like model the ability to plan and actually have goals and feelings, all you gotta do is add one system that creates these input output of it controls all the input output of the sensory information. And now what you have is a modeling system that doesn't deal with any direct information in the world. It simply built models to represent these things in the world simply. Now the thing is when this input system, this one that handles the input outputs, decides what to input to the system to create the model, it's based on basically what has a high affective valence, what it interacts with directly. So there's going to be the obvious things that have a high affective valence toward good or bad, right? Things that are good you're going to go toward, things that are bad you're going to avoid, right? You're fielding each. You see the apple, you're hungry, you don't really have to plan. There's no. So you see some other person that provides complimentary work, that's good, you don't have to think about it. But now imagine that there's something outside of the system, something that you're unable to see directly because you're not a model for it, but it is affecting this good system. Now that's going to create feelings because you're going to have this thing that's controlling something that's in your life, something that's good, something that could affect your situation indirectly. You don't have a model for it though. So that's where you get the feelings from. Goals is where you take this utility function, right? Understanding that when you're creating all these models and understanding how things can be interacted with later, it'll allow you to start planning, because to do any sort of movement or do anything, it's with respect to time, allowing the situation to arise where it sees, it basically sees an investment, right? Where someone takes time, like an energy, calories and whatnot, and invest into something that seems to have no upfront, benefit. A couple days of calories, a lot of time gone, and then all of a sudden now you have a tool. Now this tool allows you to save on energy, it allows you to save on time, and then you see how what was originally a couple hours of investment turned around and you've already returned on investment several, days, weeks, months later, and that's all part of the model system, the affective good. And now you're creating models that will allow you to perceive the future, perceiving how you can set what is bad, right? Like fire can burn you, that is bad, but if you understand how to manipulate it correctly, you can use it to extract more calories from the food that you're consuming, and thus now you found utility in what is bad. And so now you're not necessarily directly running away from things that are bad if you can see some sort of future utility investing in that bad thing, right? So it's very simple. Two systems: input, output, sensory, the modeling. The one that does the modeling just does good, bad, go, no go. That's all it does. It gets presented with a scenario, and in that scenario, it's either going to label that data as good or bad based on its previous models that are most similar. Now, if it doesn't have any previous models, the whole thing is to interact with it directly, to go and decide whether or not there is something good or bad. If there's no good or bad, if it's neutral, which is very rare, then basically you don't build up that model representation of it. It just becomes something very in the background. You recognize some good in it, some good aspect that gets represented in the model. And then now you have this scenario where you have these two systems that are just kind of playing back and forth. You've got good, you've got bad, you've got utility. And the utility, as well as the external effects that are playing on systems that have a good label, will allow you to make perception into a time-space dimension that you are not currently invested in. It's easier to understand a lot of these things when you understand that the whole 3D time, 2D space nonsense, or 3D space, 1D time is garbage. There's a dimension of time per dimension of space. Understand that for you to acquisition a line, or to know it's a line, you have to have acquisition a point here and a point here. That's what zero dimension, or one dimension. It's the dimension there at different times. Understand you build that up. How that connects directly to your situation, right? Every day you're presented with some scenario where you have to make a decision. Now, whether or not you decide to go or not to go, to do or not to do so, is based on your previous experiences, right? So everything is in your head. It's all perception. So your perception system right now is being confronted with something that's labeled as good or bad based on the past, and that past experience of good or bad is going to be projected into the future, and that's going to allow you to decide not to do something. So if you say, I'm not going to do something, that is because your perception of, in this moment, going back to the past, that's showing you negative outcome. You perceive negative outcome in the future. That's 3 dimensions right there. It's time and the 3D space. You see that. And now you have an extra dimension, the connection, right? The connection between us and the upside down, the reverse time, whatever opposite you want, however you want to refer to it. And that would be gravity and light, like there's a projection, and it's a little complicated to show it without like a diagram and some other stuff. And I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't know where I'll end up getting my information pulled because I say something counter to the narrative. But yeah, it's 14 dimensions. We exist in the 3D time, 3D space, and well, technically 7 dimensions, right? And plus the dimension. Uh, but you can also there is the direct ability to trade off some space for time, and it gets a little more complicated. But just understand the symmetry. There's a dimension of time per dimension of space because you can't even have acquisition of data without it being with respect to some reference point. So it's like if you want to know that it's a three-dimensional object, you have to have acquisition in 3 dimensions. Those 3 dimensions can't be acquisition simultaneously. You have 3 dimensions. For us, we're just a mental model used to compress data through experience. And so for us, it's just it's like a video game. It's a little bit different in the way in which we perceive it, but that's what it comes down to. So next time you're about to make a decision on whether or not you're going to do or not going to do something, recognize right away that that almost instantaneous, like deciding to not do something or to do something, came from 3 dimensions of time. The time in which you were presented, the time in which you perceived of some sort of scenario, and then you perceiving the future outcome. All that happened at the same time for you to have made that 3 dimensional decision. Fucking cool, huh? Now, if you're looking around for more evidence, look around on the chemicals, on the formula sheet, the sheet that shows you all the atoms and stuff. You see carbon and why that's, you see what the carbon is there doing, and see if you kind of find anything else that kind of looks like it could fill the place of carbon, except that maybe it makes more sense. Maybe we are more similar to not a rock that is either going to catch fire, be used to drag off and make pencils, lead, or compressed into a rock. Maybe we're more like these switching type things, this metalloid substance that allows electrons to come and go. Because, isn't that what we're doing? Maybe I've already said too much. But then you're going to see a number there, and you're going to see that connection between the numbers and the dimensions of space and time. You're also going to look at the orbitals. And when you see the orbitals, and the orbitals will start to connect to other things, when you start solving equations like E equals mc squared, you solve for mass by using the F equals ma equation. You just basically, I don't know if you know that force is just distance, energy over distance, blah, blah, blah. But eventually you start working it out, look at gravitational constant, and you start solving that once you have these, and you'll start to recognize right away, you're like, 4 masses, or masses to the 4th. And you look at the orbitals, and you're like, pretty cool. This whole symmetry thing, man, it goes way, way up. But that's just me. I just wanted to drop that on here for I don't know what reasons, but now you guys know.